Jose, I think because of what you do and the technology behind your company is so key. I think maybe we start from there, we start from maybe even by defining the problem. What is the problem that your technology solves?
I think we could take it from two sides. So if I'm pitching the company, right, I define the problem as a lack of efficiency in productive processes that are related to water and gases in water. So in aquaculture, it's pretty straightforward because everybody knows that fish need oxygen. And when you are growing fish in high densities, you will need to inject oxygen into the water to allow the fish to breathe, right? So injecting the oxygen has cost, an energy cost, and an economic cost. And doing it with nanobubbles, with our technology, reduces that cost. And also it gives the fish an extra something that accelerates the growth, reduces the feed conversion, and creates a better environment for fish welfare. But the same thing happens in other industries as well. So we also work in agriculture, and in agriculture, I have been seeing increasing information about how the problem with the nutrient density, for example, in the produce has to do with the soil, and the fact that it's been overworked, that it's been compacted, and so on. The reason for all of that is that eventually you don't get enough oxygen into a root zone, and the oxygen is needed by the microbes that do all the nutrient interchange between the soil and the plant. And so with the nanobubbles, you're able to reach the root zone with the oxygen in a much more efficient way than tilling, for example, and so on. So there's different industries. And I said at the beginning, there's two sides, because then there's my personal original purpose, which was basically based on technology. Like what I've always been fascinated by technology. I've also always been attracted to nature. So I ended up in this beautiful place where the main industry is salmon farming, and which, to the person that doesn't live here, seems like a very basic industry, but actually it's pretty high tech. So when I started working here, I identified that oxygen injection was one of the things that hadn't been improved over the years as other things had. So that's why I started looking at other ways of doing it.
So essentially, in general, the technology is about injecting oxygen into a matrix of some sort.
Yeah.
You apply it to different industry, one being aquaculture, as you said, agriculture.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
And mining.
Mining,
yeah.
Okay. And specifically around aquaculture, why is it important to inject oxygen and to do it properly?
Yeah, so like I said, if you're growing fish in high densities, the water is not going to have enough oxygen to sustain the fish, and you need to inject it artificially. That comes with a cost. In land-based facilities, that cost can be pretty high up in the sort of priorities, and so it's important to do it as efficient as possible. So that's where we started. We thought, okay, let's try and find a way of injecting oxygen as efficient as possible. We identified nanobubble technology, which was very new in 2018 when we started, and it was a very hard sell because it was new. The hardware was expensive. The hardware wasn't as efficient as it has become over the years, and so we weren't very successful at the beginning at pitching the technology for just oxygen injection for the fish, which was the main problem in terms of like the amount of oxygen that you need to put into the water. But we came across the seabed remediation problem. The problem is the seabed pollution, right?
Mm-hmm. So this is from salmon farms basically being on top of that particular area and then polluting the seabed.
This is an inevitable. Like if you're going to have open cages in the sea, you are going to have sedimentation onto the seabed, and you could argue all day about whether the environment is able to
recover
or accommodate this extra organic matter or not. But the fact is that you're putting something that wasn't there into the seabed, and there's no argument about that. So when we started in 2018, there was a bit of a scandal because the seabed sedimentation and the pollution of the seabed and what you can do about it in the salmon industry in Chile is highly regulated. And there was a scandal with a company that adulterated the seabed to basically pass the test.
Ouch.
So it was kind of a high profile thing. And every company was very worried that whatever they did had to do like by the book, because it was in public opinion, and also the agencies were looking very closely at what companies were doing. And so we were on the right timing to propose a solution. And we started working on a way of applying nanobubbles into the seabed, and we realized that we had something quite powerful, because we were able to accelerate the recovery of the seabed using nanobubbles without incurring into negative side effects like suspension and basically changing what was there in the first place.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder if we need to maybe give a little bit more background for people that might not be aware. Incidentally, my background is very much around industrial wastewater and industrial wastewater treatment, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. But for somebody who's not familiar, why would you need oxygen to treat anyway, and what are nanobubbles?
So when you have organic waste, you need to reduce it, to reincorporate it, like mineralize it and reincorporate it into the environment. And that there are different processes, but the main process which is considered more healthy is the aerobic process, in which you have organisms and microorganisms that use oxygen to metabolize the organic matter and produce CO2 and other compounds that are stable. And so when you have organic matter going into the seabed, which happens in nature as well, when, like, maybe more famously, when a whale dies and it goes into and it falls down on the fish, it will feed a lot of organisms and microorganisms, and they will require oxygen to feed on whatever falls in there. So the problem is that when you have too much organic matter, more than what the environment is used to, there's more use of oxygen, which eventually gets depleted. And when there is no more oxygen, the microorganisms and the bigger organisms that are using the oxygen to metabolize the organic matter, they die. And then you start having other reactions, which are anaerobic, which produce substances that are toxic to other organisms, and it gets worse and worse. So you get methane, what do you call it in English? Sulfuric acid, like, all this kind of nasty stuff, the rotten egg smell.
Yeah. Hydrogen sulfide.
Hydrogen sulfide, yeah. And so a way of avoiding this anaerobic condition is putting oxygen into the seabed. But it's difficult because, well, if you did it like the more intuitive way and just put holes with oxygen into the seabed, it will like the bubbles will float up, and they will create like an upwelling current, and it will resuspend all the sediment, and that can make it even worse because the underlayers of the sediment are more anaerobic, and they're carrying all this nasty stuff that can really make it a lot worse for the environment. So whatever you do, you need to not touch the sediment. So in come the nanobubbles. So nanobubbles are very tiny bubbles, nanometric, so less than a micron, usually around 50 to 200 nanometers in diameter. And they have a set of physical and chemical properties that are quite unique. The main ones are related to the size, the specific surface, so the amount of surface that they have relative to the total volume is very, very high, which means that they can interact with the water in a much more efficient way, because the interchange of gas from inside the bubble to the outside happens through the surface. They don't float. So generally, a smaller bubble will have a lower buoyancy force. For nanobubbles, that buoyancy force is so small that it's comparable to even like the repulsive forces between the bubbles, and much smaller than what the currents and the changes of temperature can influence on the bubbles. So in practice, they don't rise up.
That's incredible. So that's essentially that doesn't float up.
So they behave more like particles, like a colloidal, very small particle. They have this electric charge, which means that they repel each other because they're all the same polarity sign.
So they don't
come
combine
together and create larger bubbles. And the same electric charge make them they have like an affinity to some ions, and particularly to organic matter.
So they stick.
So they tend to not only to thick, but they are attractive. So I always explain, like in the classic theory of gas dissolution, you always think about the efficiency of getting the gas into the water. But there's no mention of the efficiency of getting the gas that it's already in the water into wherever you're trying to use it for. Mm-hmm. So in the case of nanobubbles, that efficiency seems to be much higher, and it's still a matter of academic research. So I can't really say like a number, but yeah. So when you inject water with nanobubble oxygen on the seabed, it doesn't go into the sediment. We just put it like 50 centimeters above the seabed in a very low current, so that it doesn't create any resuspension.
So it's not even touching, it's like suspended a few centimeters.
We put a diffuser with some legs, so it touches in 3 or 4 points, but then there's a flow of water going down from the diffuser, which doesn't affect the seabed, so it doesn't create any resuspension. And the oxygen that's in the water, as dissolved oxygen, but also as nanobubbles, is very efficient in transferring into the sediment. And so we can get changes of first pH. So if the seabed is anaerobic, usually the pH is very low. ORP, which is the oxygen reduction potential, which kind of explains what kind of reactions are happening in the sediment, goes up. So you start seeing aerobic reactions. Eventually, the microbiome is going to shift from anaerobic to aerobic, and then you start seeing a reduction in the organic matter, and it's working, and it's basically absorbing, the environment is absorbing the sediment in a much more healthier way.
It's almost like you're creating a little bioreactor in situ.
Yeah, but it's 60 meters under the surface of the water. So yeah, before nanobubbles, there was one company here in Chile that was doing seabed remediation in a legal way, so to speak, which basically moved a lot of water from the surface, which is oxygen rich, to the seabed and tried to emulate the water currents. Yeah. But it was slow, it was very energy intensive, and the amount of oxygen that you could get onto the seabed was much smaller. So we basically accelerated all of that in a much simpler way.
And if we look at aquaculture specifically, I'm really curious to understand who are your customers, so who actually buys from you, and why do they do it? Because what I've seen in my experience is that water treatment is usually done because a regulator tells you to do it. Rarely there is a business case for doing it.
Yeah, I understand. So this is the same case. Okay. There's a regulation. So the salmon farming here in Chile is what is called all in, all out. So the fish go into a site, and after it grows to harvest size, it's harvested, and then the site is followed. Yeah, so it basically rests for a few months, and that's all regulated. Before you can stock it again with new fish, you need to pass a test on the seabed. And so they basically measure that the seabed has enough, it's aerobic. It's undergoing aerobic reactions on the organic matter, and it has enough oxygen for those reactions to keep going. Okay. Which is a way of measuring whether the environment will be able to cope with the extra organic matter that's going to come down on the next cycle. If it doesn't pass the test, then you cannot stock it.
Meaning you're losing production, you're losing that.
You're losing production because the licenses for the farms are limited. In Chile, they're mostly what they are. There's no new licenses.
Okay, so you can't just go somewhere else.
Exactly. So the bigger companies do, and this is one of the reasons that the industry tends to consolidate, because it's very beneficial for the farmers to have a lot of sites to choose from. But yeah, nobody has infinite sites. And of course, there's some sites that are better than others. And so yeah, there's an incentive to try and, let's say, I would like to say, like, keep the seabed healthy, right? But yeah, the big incentive is to be able to pass the test so you can stock the fish in the sites that are more convenient for the next cycle. So to answer the question is, our customers are the salmon farmers, the salmon producers, okay, but they buy it because they need to pass this test.
Yeah. Who would you normally talk to within the salmon farms? Is it like the operation managers? Is there like a head of environmental compliance or something like that you relate to?
Yeah,
Or?
there's always, depending on the farmer, there's different structures, but usually there's a technical department, and within the technical department there's the environmental manager, which sometimes is the same as what they call like the concessions manager, which is the one that it's responsible to have the concessions certified and so on, so that the production can come in and do their thing. Operations can build the site, and then production can come in with the fish.
Right, so it's licensing and environmental compliance.
So they are our internal clients within the salmon farmers. These are all big companies. There's no small salmon farmer. There's of course different sizes, but the smallest is still a pretty
big company.
A pretty big company, yeah.
This might be a bit of an aside, but why is there no small salmon farm?
For exactly the reason that I was saying. So if you're a small company and you only have like 2 or 3 licenses, you have no legroom for movement, and it's a difficult coordination, because the fish that are going into the sea, they have already been growing for a year. So if the time comes for them to be stocked in sea and you don't have the site, you're basically screwed.
Yeah. Where did they grow before coming to the sea farm?
Yeah, so salmon have, if we go back a couple of steps, salmon, the life cycle of the salmon has freshwater stage and a seawater stage. In nature, the eggs will be laid in fresh water, they will hatch, they will spend season in fresh water, and then they will undergo physiological change, which is called smoltification, which is when they change so that they can go and live in seawater. So then they go down the rivers to the ocean, and then in the normal life cycle where they're not harvested, they will eventually come back on the fresh water to reproduce again.
Okay, and in a industrial farming situation, what happens instead?
Yeah, so in industrial farming situation, you have a stage in freshwater, which is usually done in tanks.
Okay, so this is on land.
Yeah, originally it was mostly done in the lakes. So if you go to the Yanquihue Lake, you still see a couple of farms. There is like a schedule to take them out of the lakes because of the same pollution problems and the public perception of this problem as well. So now most of it is done on land in tanks. And then there's 2 main ways of doing it. One is the flow-through facilities, which basically take the water from a river, and then they put it through the tanks, and the water goes out of the tanks back in, gets filtered to comply with the regulations and the quality of the water that can go back into the river, and the water goes back into the river and then follows through the downstream. The other way is the recirculation facilities, which are probably the biggest change in the industry in the last 10-15 years, where water gets recirculated on different amounts, usually around like 98%, 95%. And then you have a water treatment facility in the site, which removes the solids and the ammonia and the CO2 and so on, and so you can reuse the water many times before discharging it. And then you have some benefits like, the main original benefit was being able to control temperature, because fish are cold-blooded animals, so if you're able to control temperature, you can control growth. But also you can use well water, for example, like groundwater, because the amount of water you're using is much, much smaller. You can have other sources of water.
And this on-land phase, how long? So you said about a year.
Yeah.
And then how long is the sea phase?
Between 12, well, depending on the species, could be around like 9 months to 18 months. So depending on the type of salmon and also the temperature of the water. So if you go down south where the water is colder, it takes a bit longer to grow. But yeah, so from egg to harvest, it can be anything between 2 and 2.5 years.
To be honest, that's longer than I expected.
Yeah. No, it's a long cycle. So if anything happens in between, it's very difficult to plan.
Yeah. Which goes back to the fact that there's no small.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. There is a little bit of a market for buying smolts, like fish that are ready for sea, but usually the companies are kind of naturally forced to integrate vertically, and they will grow their own fish from egg to harvest.
Staying on the technology for a little longer, I was wondering if it's applicable only to salmon or whether you work with other species.
Yeah, well, it's applicable for all the aquatic species, to be honest. Here in Chile, it's all about salmon. There's no other, well, there's a few kind of experiments in the north with other species, but in terms of fish, it's 99.9% salmon. But we have been working with tilapia, which is big industry like worldwide, and shrimp. But yeah, any intensive culture will need oxygen. Shrimp is still quite extensive, especially in Latin America. If the main producer is Ecuador, of course, and it's still very extensive in the sense that you have large ponds that have very relatively few shrimp, and they will just rely on environmental oxygen to survive. But there is always the incentive to put more shrimp into the pond, and if you put oxygen, you can do that. So we've been exploring, but it's not as developed as the salmon.
When I did some research in preparation for this, I was just looking at your background. I think there's a couple of interesting things that you've done there. It'd be really cool to go through it. So you found that you're one of the co-founders, Chucao.
Yeah, perfect.
But that started in 2018.
Yeah.
What happened before that?
Right.
And there was one thing that I have in my notes which caught my attention, which was the world's largest radio astronomy project in the Atacama Desert.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you about this. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a civil mechanical engineer that's my profession. That's what I studied in the university. Like I said, I've always been attracted to technology, and ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, like they do these things with the telescope names where they do acronyms. And that was my first real proper job after university.
I see. And you studied in Santiago?
In Santiago, yeah. Yeah, I'm originally from Santiago. So yeah, so that was, I think, around 3 years where during the construction phase of the telescope, that was the largest radio telescope in the world at the time. I think it still is. There's larger projects, but they haven't been realized yet. And yeah, so I was part of the assembly integration and verifications team that received the antennas. These are like parabolic antennas, like you see in the movies.
Yeah. So those huge, like almost as big as a building type thing.
Yeah. In this case, it was around, I can't remember, it was around 60 or 90 antennas that you could move around an array. So you could put them all together to get different depths of vision into the universe, or you could put them apart by kilometers. It was interesting. The landscape was probably as different as it can get from what we see here.
Yeah. Because I mean, we should say we're in Puerto Varas in your a really cool office here, and we've got this view across the hills. You were saying in a good day you can see the volcanoes.
You can see the lake. Well, you can kind of see the lake.
Oh yes.
And over there you will see the volcano on a clear day. Yeah, Sorno volcano.
The scenery is very green. There's a huge amount of forest.
Yeah.
And you got the lake, and it's very green. I guess there's a lot of rain coming through from the Pacific.
Yeah.
Whereas up in the Atacama
there's nothing.
Like Mars.
No, up in the Atacama, the place where we lived, because I worked in shifts, 8 days on, 6 days off. I lived in Santiago, so I flew over every Wednesday. I flew either to work or back from work. The site was at 3,000 meters above sea level, so quite high. That's where we lived. The telescope itself was at 5,000 meters, but you don't want to live at 5,000 meters. So
how do you cope with the altitude sickness?
Yeah.
Because if you're living in Santiago,
yeah, which is around 500 meters.
500 meters, and on a Wednesday you go at 3,000.
Yeah.
And then the telescope is at 5,000.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mess with your body?
I guess so.
How was it?
I was younger.
Okay. You could take it.
But yeah, whenever we worked at 5,000, we used oxygen. So we carried an oxygen bottle and these tubes.
Wow.
Because not only because you feel the altitude sickness, but the lack of oxygen messes with your judgment. So
Sure.
yeah,
Of course. Yeah. You can be a very good engineer.
a safety thing. Yeah, exactly. But we also had to take like a physical test every year, I think, or every 6 months, I can't remember. And you could see your red blood cells count going up year over year because you start to get adaptation.
Wow.
And so eventually we could, people that started work were very tired all the time. Eventually we were playing football and everything at 3,000, not 5,000, but it was like just normal environment.
It's like a training without.
Yeah, I used to run a lot, and that was probably my peak performance. Also, I was younger, but but yeah, like people who do kind of endurance sports, they always train in altitude because they train the capacity to use oxygen for performance. So
That's fascinating. And was there anything? I mean, it must have been a hell of an experience.
yeah,
Is there anything that you've learned that you still think about?
I think probably what they call like the soft part of the work was more meaningful to me than the actual like engineering part. Okay. Because I learned to work in an international environment, like multidisciplinary environment as well. We worked with astronomers as well as the engineers of different disciplines. So that was a really good experience for me to get exposure to. And I think it had, and also like the high profile of the employer also helps. I'm sure when I applied to Cambridge, they took that into account. And so it opened doors. Yeah.
You mentioned Cambridge.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
Yeah, so after a few years I was kind of done with the shift schedule.
Well, you lasted 3 years.
Yeah.
Always doing that weekly schedule of flying up.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a good experience, but I didn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life.
Of course. And you must have been mid to late 20s back then?
Yeah, I think I was 25 when I started.
Yeah. So you're now 28.
I was about 28 when I quit. Yeah. Yeah, and then I started looking at what was next. I wasn't kind of ready to look for. At that time, you still looked for the job that was going to be your life for the next 20 years. Probably now it's a lot different. Like nobody expects to be in one industry or one job for the rest of their lives. And I wasn't ready to do that. So I think also working in ALMA kind of opened my eyes to the world. So I wanted the experience to live abroad more than learning something in particular or even like the place. I wanted that experience. So I applied to a bunch of programs around the world. There was a scholarship program here in Chile that was pretty good. It was called Becas Chile, where they basically financed your postgraduate degree abroad. So I applied to a few places and I got into Cambridge. So yeah, I got married. And so I went with my wife.
So you both traveled to Cambridge and spent some time there.
And I did a 1-year degree in industrial systems, manufacturing management, which was another thing that I wanted to. In ALMA, I quickly grew up to sort of not management, but I was managing people, right? Mm-hmm. And that was really not a part of my professional degree. So I have a good way with people, but I had no tools, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to study something more on the part of management and to have some tools for that. But mostly I wanted to live abroad.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you managed to combine the two, right?
So my wife and I, we moved to Cambridge. I studied for a year. Then she got a scholarship to study as well, got into a program in Cambridge as well. And I got a job. So I worked in Cambridge for 3 years. And I still think that was the best job that I've ever had.
Really?
Like employed work with the Cambridge consultants. Great school. I think most of what I still apply in terms of like product design and the way that I approach this kind of work comes from that school more than university or yeah.
That's fascinating. Tell me more about that. What was it that really stuck with you?
Well, these guys had it was the people mostly. So a Cambridge consultant does or did at the time basically product development as a consultant. So for clients, and anything from coffee pods for like the Nespresso machine to like really high tech sensors for oil and gas. I know that right now they're of course into like artificial intelligence and quantum computing and like really like high tech of whatever is happening at the moment. As a mechanical engineer, I was involved in the mechanical side of things, but I was always working with physicists, electrical engineers, electronic engineers, programmers, and like software development and so on. Yeah. And it was just the level of creativity of the people that worked there, the way to approach problems that are like on the edge of human knowledge. Yeah, it really did a lot for my professional development.
And you must have seen and you must have been put into contexts and situations that were dramatically different one from the other.
Yeah, exactly.
So stretching the limit of what you know and what you can.
Yeah, like I said, I worked with, a lot of these projects never made it to the market, but as a consultant, I didn't really care much about that because my job was to deliver on the project, and many times the clients were like technology or marketing technology departments for the companies, and they wanted to have these projects in their portfolio, but not necessarily all of them made it to the market. But I worked in coffee pods for a European coffee company, developing the most like espresso-like drink for a certain technology platform for making coffee. And I also worked for oil and gas companies doing like borehole sensors that go into the oil wells and measure a bunch of different parameters. Yeah. And other things in between. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Was there any interesting, funny story that you still tell people at dinner parties from that time?
Well, everything was pretty confidential, so
of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell a lot of what I was doing there, but
that must have made you even cooler. Sorry, mate. I can't tell you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I was married at the time, so I didn't use the stories as much as I did when I was the telescope,
Of course. Oh, yeah.
Talking about the stars and stuff. Yeah. That was, that had another twist to it.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I want to ask you about the marketing, because as I'm sure it's top of mind for you now as an entrepreneur, developing a product for which there is no market is pretty pointless. But as a consultant, if a company came to you and said, look, we want a compostable coffee pod that tastes of mint, would they at that point know whether there was a market for this thing or not? And was at any point part of your job to worry about that? Or you just delivered on the specifics and then it was their problem if there was a market or not?
For me, at the level of seniority that I had at the time, it was of no consequence. We had a bunch of technical specifications that we needed to deliver, and we stuck to them, and it was up to the client to see if that had any sense for the consumer, if it was a consumer good, or for the industry, if it was an industrial product. And I think I wasn't really exposed to the need to market anything until I became an entrepreneur, which was a big challenge for me, because I think it has also changed in the way that they are teaching engineering right now in my same university. I never took a course in sales, for example.
So sales, marketing, business was never...
Well, business, like finance and that kind of stuff, but not on the front end of how do you do like a marketing plan, or how do you approach a sales meeting or anything. Yeah. How do you assess the market? I didn't have any training on that.
How did that, obviously you're using the past tense, how did that transition go from going from...
I still haven't had any proper training, but of course it was a hard transition. When we started with Tomas, my partner, the company is officially called Chukao Technology Consultants.
Right.
And we thought, we haven't touched on that period of my professional life, but my job before this was I was managing project for a recirculation facility for salmon, for the freshwater stage.
Yeah, so that's Chilean aquaculture.
Chilean aquaculture.
And so we've got to say that you basically moved back from Cambridge to Chile.
Yeah. So Well, if we go on with the story, I was in Cambridge working for Cambridge Consultants. I had studied in Cambridge with a scholarship from Corfo, which is the Chilean development agency. And I needed to come back to the country to basically repay the scholarship. Not in cash, but the commitment was that you had to come back.
Bring your skills and yeah. That's an interesting way to do it. I mean, from their point of view, that's a really smart way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's worked really well for the country as well. If you talk, like, especially in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, if you talk to the people that are in the ecosystem, chances are that they at some point went out, studied with these scholarships, and came back. So
that's really cool.
I'm sure I haven't seen any measurements, like proper measurements of the impact that it has had on the country, but I'm pretty sure that they are pretty high in terms of impact.
And I mean, you're still here, so yeah. Obviously you then Chile obviously gained from that experience that you brought back in.
I like to think that it did, yeah. So, but when we moved back, my first son was born in the UK. We moved back. We didn't have a house. We didn't have a job. So we said, okay, it's the time to decide where we want to live because we are free, right? We don't have any constraints, and we came here because we liked the idea of living like more in nature, in a smaller place with a slower pace and so on.
Yeah. Rather than going back to Santiago.
Yeah.
I can see the appeal. I mean, I've only been here a couple of days, but it's stunning.
It was also, there was an incentive from Corfo to move to the regions rather than Santiago. So if you moved to any place other than Santiago, the period that you had to stay in the country was shorter, which didn't have any consequence on the long run. But it also came to our minds that, if we come here and it doesn't work out, we only need to stay here for a year and we can move somewhere else.
So it could have been like just an experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. What would have happened if you didn't come back? Like, was that like
I would probably still be working for Cambridge Consultants. But I like to think.
No, that's fair enough. But in terms of the deal that you had with Corfo.
If we didn't come back, yeah. Well, in legal terms, I think I would have had to pay back the money that they put, and that's a lot of money.
Okay. I think you've done a good job of covering the whole story, and we're now getting to the founding of ChucaoTech. So basically started as a consultancy.
Yeah. So I ended up here, started working for Chilean Aquaculture as kind of chief engineer for project management. And I was doing all these like improvement projects and expansion projects and so on. My idea was that I could do that externally for more companies, right? Kind of the push that gave me the reason to resign as an employee and try to do this was my second daughter. It was making it very difficult for me to balance family and work. The fact that I was working like 100 kilometers south from here. So I was driving every day 1 hour south, 1 hour back.
And 1 hour south from here?
Yeah.
Where was that?
In Parua. That's where you take the ferry to the...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because the road doesn't go far.
Well, it's 85 kilometers.
Yeah. So you have to take one ferry?
No, but not to work. So when the road ended, that was where the...
Okay.
The hatchery was.
Right. So before on the Carretera Austral...
It's on the other side.
Towards Chiloé.
To the east, towards Chiloé, yeah. Yeah, so I was basically, when I was at work, I was worthless for the family because I couldn't pick up my son from school, or if he was ill, I couldn't stay home for my wife to be able to do her job as well. So I said, okay, I need some flexibility, and I'm sure I can do this as an external consultancy company and I met Tomás around that time. Both of our wives were pregnant. He was coming back from the UK as well. He had the idea of doing consultancy in the sort of sustainability area. And we thought, let's help each other out, basically. So we started the company as a consultancy, started trying to sell consultancy services. It didn't work.
Why not? Because, I mean, from where I'm standing, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, you were doing that for an employer.
Yeah.
You're now saying, well, I can do the same thing by myself, offering the service as an external. Why did it not work?
So the few projects that we did sell, I think we spent like 5 times more hours selling them than doing them. And so it was not financially viable for us. But it worked out in the sense that because we talked to a lot of people trying to sell a consultancy, we learned a lot about the issues and the problems of the industry. But eventually we saw that we had to have a service or a product that we could repeatedly sell. Because developing something like this, let's say the quotation process took a lot of the development hours, and then it was already developed and nobody was going to pay you for that time, right?
So you needed like a...
Whereas if you sold that again and again, then it could work. And that's how we started doing the seabed remediation service. Because originally we thought, we know about the problem, we know what the solution can be. Let's tell people, and they can do it, and we will just help them as consultants. But yeah, it was not like economically, it wasn't very positive for us, because once you teach people to do it, then how do you sell it again? And also the companies didn't have the inner capacity to do it themselves, even if you sold them the equipment or whatever. So we saw at some point in the late 2018, we started in January. So and in around December, we said, let's just go all in and develop this as a service and sell it as a service, like a turnkey solution.
Instead of telling people how to do it, you would just say...
Instead of doing like the consultancy thing of,
You would just say, okay, here's the hardware and this is how to use it, essentially.
Yeah, and that never worked like that in seabed remediation. We never sold a consultancy service for seabed remediation, but we every single farmer that we talked to had the same issue. So we realized that there was potential there.
And then what happened?
And then, we started developing the hardware. Initially, we started with third-party hardware, so we didn't develop our own nanobubble technology until later. We bought a bunch of machines that were available in the market, and we developed the hardware in terms of everything else that had to go in there: pumps, hoses, seabed diffusers, so on, and the regulation part of it. So a lot of the time that it took us from late 2018 until 2020, when we went commercial, was due to the fact that we had to get like a resolution from the fisheries department to be able to apply this service into the seabed. And that took around just about a year to get the first permission. At that time, you had to get a permission for every single site. So every single site that you wanted to work for, you had to apply for this resolution, and it would take anything between, the first one took 1 year, and then it would take anything between 3 to 6 months.
And that's not the case anymore?
No, because, so we started in 2020, there was no competition. Everybody wanted to work with us. We started with 1 or 2 sites. At the peak of the demand, we had 8 sites going simultaneously. And in 2022, I also believe that it was because we were doing this successfully, and it was working for the salmon farmers. It was working for the environment, because we were being successful in recovering the seabed under the sites. The fisheries department released like a general resolution that regulated the activity. So they said basically, any company that can demonstrate that they are doing seabed remediation, they even spoke about nanobubbles, right? This and this and this way, they can sign up in a register of companies allowed to do this, and they can do it without having to undergo this 3 to 6 month process. Now you basically, if you're in this list, you just need to announce that you are doing remediation in one site a couple of weeks in advance, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and then you just turn up and do it.
Yeah. And so after that, in about 6 to 12 months after this resolution, there was 8 companies doing the same thing. And now I think there's around 12. So the good thing was that when we started, so we were using third-party technology. We were still looking at other applications for nanobubble technology, but like I said, the hardware was too expensive. It was energy hungry, so it used a lot of energy, so that becomes a cost, of course. And we ran into difficulties with our suppliers, and so we started developing our own version. Our thought at the time was, everybody was talking about how many nanobubbles per milliliter they were making, how small the bubbles were, but there was no evidence that making I don't know, 1 billion nanobubbles per milliliter was better than making 500 million. And so we said, let's try stuff out and see if the seabed remediates as quickly with maybe less. Because at the time we thought, it's going to be very difficult to catch up with a level of development that these companies have. So we started trying stuff, and the other thing was reliability. So the main problem with the hardware that we had from other companies that are now our competitors was reliability on the field. So they would get clogged, the seawater would corrode stuff, and so on.
And these are all companies from around here or global?
No. So we work with a big North American company. I'm not going to say the name, but yeah, if you Google it, you will find it.
Okay. What have been the most difficult moments in your journey with ChucaoTech as an entrepreneur or as a person?
Yeah, every month around this time, you need to pay salaries.
Yeah.
Now, I think for sure the most difficult moments were at the beginning, because I basically ran with no income for about 2 years, which was a strain for my family. It was a personal strain for my, anything from my self-esteem to like being able to, for my mind to be at rest that I'm able to provide for. Like I said, I had a newborn daughter, and it was hard. I remember that when just a couple of months before we started with the commercial service, we already had the clients. They were waiting for us, but we didn't have this resolution from the fisheries department, and it was, every month was, maybe next month, and so on. And around November, I told Tomas, if nothing happens by the end of January, I'm gonna start. Yeah, this is it. I need to find a job because I can't keep this up. And yeah, it was maybe 2 weeks before the end of January that we got the resolution, and then everything started flowing. But yeah, then of course there's been challenges. There's always challenges, but it's not been as close to the end as it was before it even started.
Yeah. It's almost like a constant stress, constant reminder that everything could just end tomorrow.
And then at the beginning, we've never done, like, doing maritime services, like services at sea, has a lot of challenges. I've had everything from, personnel issues where people that are living like 14 days on a small vessel with, not a lot of space. There is fights and stuff.
Yeah.
The sailor mentality is a special mentality as well. Calls in the middle of the night that the boat is stuck in a sandbank or whatever. Yeah. That was a lot in the beginning when we were like gaining experience with this, and it's 24/7. It doesn't stop. So that was very challenging, especially at the beginning. Now it's more, we got a hold of it and it's become easier, but yeah.
I guess you learn more from those moments than you learn from the good ones. And I was going to ask you, what sort of advice would you give to an entrepreneur or even a younger engineer that wants to follow your steps and do something similar? They're passionate about technology, they're passionate about engineering, they're passionate perhaps about the ocean, and they want to do something, perhaps in an entrepreneurial fashion, bring a solution. What would be your advice?
When I talk to people, I always tell them about this, like whether they should or should not be entrepreneurs. And a lot of times the limitation that they see is that I don't have this great idea, or I don't have this great sense of purpose. And there's a lot of, if you go into social media, and of course what you see there is the bigger faces and the bigger purposes and the greatest success stories and so on. But behind them, there's millions like us that don't necessarily have this world-changing purpose, but we at least move in the right direction. That's what I feel. And also when you start, that sense of purpose doesn't necessarily converge with the kind of ideas that you come up with. But if you don't start, you're not gonna know. And so when I talk to younger people, for me it would have been so much easier to do it before I was a father, right? Because of the kind of commitments that I had to my family weighed on me at the beginning, especially, and it was so hard to balance that. And so, many people will tell you, like, build your career first, learn from the industry. I don't think I learned a lot of, like, the things that I learned from the industry they are valuable, but they're not necessarily the things that have allowed me to, I don't like to use the word succeed, because that's like the end of, to keep alive, right?
Yeah. Survive.
To survive, yeah. Survival is a success, I guess.
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
So you would have, if you had to do it all over again, you'd do it sooner.
I would do it sooner. Yeah, for me, it's the question I ask myself when and we ask ourselves with Tomas when we are going to a new territory or a new industry is not like, yeah, there needs to be a mission and a purpose and so on. Is it aligned? That's the easy question. The most difficult one is, are we going to be able to do it better than the rest of the people? Because if not, just let somebody else do it. And that's what I feel is like the big sense of purpose. Yeah, it's a big banner and it keeps you focused in the right direction. But really, just find the thing that you're good at and try to align it to that purpose. That's what's going to be valuable, I think.
And I take your point. It doesn't need to be this massive thing. It doesn't need to be necessarily that when you're starting the thing that you will be doing for the rest of your life, and that's your life purpose.
Yeah.
Basically, start small. Start with something that can move the needle in the right direction. And
yeah, just make sure that the needle is pointing in the right direction. So yeah, I don't have a very high opinion of people putting all this effort in the next. Well, it's not anymore, but there was a time where everybody was doing like delivery apps and online retail sales and stuff, and I was like, what? We don't need that.
Yeah, what's the point?
Right? What's so? But still, people buy it, and the market doesn't necessarily prefer things that are better for everyone. So for me, it's just make sure that you're pointing in the right direction, and then just exploit what you do best. Because if not, it's very difficult to succeed. If you need to be better than the rest of the offer out there. So.
I know that you recently won an award in Dubai.
Yeah.
And for your innovation. And you were in Valencia in Spain last month, and you were in Norway for Aquaculture. So how has been your experience of representing a Latin American startup globally? Is that something that is even in your mind, or you don't really think about
Not
that?
too much, to be honest. Yeah, we've won a bunch of awards over the last couple of years. That was by design, to be honest.
Yeah?
Because before that we did very little marketing. Our clients are, down the road. We knock on doors and we pick up the phone and we can reach. There's only I think around 17 salmon farmers in Chile, so you could talk to all of them in a week. So we didn't think that we needed to do a lot of marketing, but then we started growing. We started looking at Europe, salmon industries in Europe, other industries. We wanted to see also if there was a pull from other industries, from the technology, and we realized that nobody knew about us. And so, the knocking on doors, it's not very efficient. Like I said, I'm a mechanical engineer. Tomas is a lawyer. We had no training in marketing. On 2024, we brought someone in that had for communications and marketing, and one of the things that we saw an opportunity in doing was applying to all these awards. And I gotta say, much to my surprise, we started winning some of them. And it was, but the point was getting visibility, right? So the awards in itself, they don't. Well, the one in Dubai carried a little bit of cash, so that was nice. But in general, they're just a recognition, and what they give you is visibility and to some extent validation. So the first one we won was the Aquaculture Awards in Scotland last year, and that put us in the space of the European salmon industry. So when you go and talk to somebody and you mention the company name. And it's funny because the company name is very Chilean. The Chucao is a Chilean bird.
Oh, is it?
It's very difficult to pronounce. My father told me, don't use that name because someday you're going to go international. But when you go and talk to somebody abroad and they already know, oh, you were the ones that won this award in Scotland. It
Opens the door.
accelerates the conversation as well, right? So yeah, personally, I don't think about, I'm like the ambassador of this Chilean technology abroad. We are just trying to grow and trying to make as much impact as we can. Yeah, Valencia and Aquanor are more like commercial efforts. We were in Valencia because when I went to Aquanor, I was just visiting. We have a commercial director in Europe, Bob, who lives in the Netherlands. Aquanor is a huge exhibition. It's expensive to exhibit, so we went there as attendees, and it's so big that in 3 days we weren't able to talk to everybody that we wanted to talk to. But Valencia is it's a conference. It has an exhibition on the side. It's a smaller exhibition. It's less expensive to exhibit, and it also a lot of people that attend there are not necessarily salmon farmers. So there's a lot of farming of other species in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Turkey, Germany, Poland.
Yeah. So it's a bit of exposure to other markets.
Yeah. So that's why we went to Valencia, and we've done a bunch of exhibitions on the agricultural side as well. Yeah, so that's our effort to get out there and put the product in front of the buyer and get visibility for the company.
Yeah. What do you find as the most difficult thing in getting that visibility and going out there?
Well, in many cases, this technology is not something that people know that they need, so it's a slow process. It's the sales cycle is so long, and it begins with an education of the buyer. So, for example, in salmon, for breathing oxygen for the fish, everybody knows they need oxygen. There's other oxygen injection systems, and this is a better one. So
and it's a regulatory requirement.
For the seabed remediation, it's a regulatory requirement.
So it's a no-brainer.
In Chile, it's not the same regulation in Norway or Canada or Scotland. So the conversations are different. But when you go into the agro industry, for example, farmers know that they need air in the soil, but they've never done anything to put the air in the soil. It just happens, or they till it, right? They turn the soil around to aerate it. This is not an input that they knew that they needed, and so it takes a lot of time to educate on this, and then create the awareness, the need, and eventually the urgency and the sale. I gotta say, we haven't done all the work in that sense. The competition has also been great in terms of pushing on the same direction and creating a market that wasn't there before. So, because 10 years ago there was no market for nanobubbles. If you went and have a nanobubble device, nobody was gonna come and buy it. Yeah. So you need to go out and.
So in a way, it's good that the competition is also going out there and making a case for it, because then it creates the market rather than you single-handedly trying to.
Yeah, and I've got to say that we've ridden that wave because we're much smaller still than our biggest competitor, and so they spend a lot of effort in that marketing.
Yeah, but hey, you're winning all the awards.
There's a lot of awards going around, to be honest.
Two relatively quick things that I wanted to check with you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of being here for you? I mean, one that comes to mind, obviously you're close to your salmon industry customers. Is there any other advantage in being in Chile specifically, and or disadvantages?
Yeah, so for our initial line of business, so working with the salmon farmers in seabed remediation, this was and is the perfect place because, well, we worked with the regulatory agencies, we already know the space. Like I said, our clients are down the road in Puerto Montt, 15 minutes from here. Yeah. The region is technologically advanced enough that we can build things here, we can manufacture things here.
So the supply chain is
the supply chain is doable, and it also makes sense in terms of cost. It's not a huge disadvantage that we need to import some of the materials that we are then transforming. The salmon industry has built a supply chain as well. So you have, I don't know, like 15 flights going into Puerto Montt. Puerto Montt is the second busiest airport in Chile after Santiago.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, Puerto Montt is like an aquaculture hub. Yeah, not just for Chile, but also for South America in general.
Yeah, for the world. We are the second largest salmon producer after Norway. Salmon is our second export product by value after copper. And probably 95% of the salmon that is produced goes out by air in the airport. And so the connectivity is good. It's not that we are isolated. But having said that, once you start looking at other industries, yeah, it's not a huge advantage. Like for agriculture, for example, there is a lot of agriculture here, but they don't irrigate because there's a lot of rain. And so, yeah, it becomes a little bit more uncomfortable to be here and not in the central region, for example, if we're talking about agriculture in Chile. We do have an office in California. We have one sales rep over there. And we have a person in Europe. So yeah, we're not doing everything from here. On the other hand, Puerto Varas has become kind of an entrepreneurial hub, especially after the pandemic. Like I said, a lot of people came to live here attracted by the environment, not necessarily by the opportunities. But today it's increasingly easier to live wherever you want, regardless of what you're doing. So. And there's people trying to cash on the attractiveness of the environment, even to make it a reason to be here. So companies are basically saying, if you work for us, you can come and live in this beautiful place. And so it's like one of their benefits.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's a bit like Silicon Valley, If you live there, you get California.
Yeah. So the ecosystem is not as developed as in the Silicon Valley, but eventually I think it will, because right now one of the issues is that universities are very few and not top rated, but that's probably going to change within the next 20 years. If you start seeing a lot of talent here, they want to send their children to a good university. There's going to be an incentive for them to move here, and so there's something happening, yeah, and we like it here. So we get a lot of questions like this, especially from the mining industry, because the mining industry, of course, is in the north of Chile, in the desert, or most of it is. There's like a natural urge to be close, but when you put it down in numbers, it's not entirely necessary, I don't think. Because right now, like if I needed to go to Antofagasta, for example, up north, I can be there in 4 hours by plane.
So it's connected. Well, it's well connected.
It's well connected, yeah.
You lived in the UK, and so you know how relatively easy it is to start a company there, and the sort of business infrastructure makes it relatively easy to operate as an entrepreneur. Does Chile feel like it's a good place to start a business? Is it easy enough to incorporate a company?
It's super easy.
Super easy.
Yeah. Well, I was never an entrepreneur in the UK, but I'm gonna guess that it may be easier. You can start a company in a day. The banking system is good. It's easy to work. It's modern. Internet connectivity is great. I don't think that's a limitation. I think, yeah, like I mentioned, ecosystems. Of course, in Cambridge, the ecosystem was, it's like they call it like the Silicon Fen, as opposed to Silicon Valley, but it's like a hub for technology innovation as well. When I was in Cambridge, if I wanted to, find a supplier for whatever, like high-tech material or like really specific high-precision machining or wherever, it was in a 15-mile radius. Here it's not as developed. And so it makes it a little bit harder when you're trying to find specific things or even like recruit specific abilities and so on. It's more difficult. And it will be the same, maybe less so in Santiago, but still not the same as Cambridge or San Francisco or whatever. But yeah, if we all move away and say, the conditions are not the best here, so we're going to establish our companies in the UK or the US or whatever, then it will never get developed. And so there's also an incentive and a sense of pride, which was what we were trying to tell with the name. We come from here and we're proud of it. And so and there is also a sense of purpose of, we can do like deep tech and things that can have an impact in the world and even like in highly developed economies from the south of Chile.
And I guess, like you say, there are enough positives to make it worth it.
Yeah. No, the positives are there. There's limitations, but I haven't seen that those limitations and difficulties have weighed us down or made us less competitive, I don't think.
Yeah. And sometimes constraints and limitations can be
They make
the
you
trigger
creative.
exactly, the trigger for innovation and creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you recommend entrepreneurs that not necessarily from Chile to move here and to set up shop here?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, of course, if we're trying to solve a problem that is here and your customer base is here, I would say yes, it's doable. I think it can be a little bit daunting to try and work the system if you are from somewhere else, and that happens if I go to the UK or any part of Europe. It's still there's a learning process of who does what and so on, but it's doable. It's not impossible. But yeah, if your customer base is somewhere else, it's difficult. I don't know. Like I said, there are some companies that have most of their clients are not here, and they are selling, they're recruiting with the theme of come and live in this beautiful place. It's still a hard sell, I think, but it will get better. If a lot of people that have high expectations of a health system, a school system, and university system come and live here, there will be development, and eventually I think it can become a hub that attracts people from other parts of the world, of Chile and the world, to come and start the companies here. The potential is here. It's just a lot of stuff to figure out. Yeah.
And it's possibly still early days, and I guess you can feel that. But at the same time, personally, I find it's quite energizing to be in a place that is going somewhere, that things are happening, becoming something a bit.
Are you talking to anybody in the Biotech Hub?
Tell me more about the Biotech Hub. Is it?
Yeah, there is a formal thing called the Biotech Hub in Puerto Varas.
That's the official name, Biotech Hub?
Yeah. Patagonia Biotech Hub. Our neighbors in the same floor, they are part of this hub, and many of them have to do something to do with the salmon industry or dairy farms or stuff like that, but a lot of them don't, and they are still here. And they're here because it's a nice place to live, and they believe that we can develop this place as a hub of innovation.
Attract enough talent, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know them. I'll reach out to them for sure.
And there's some things happening, like if you go to have you been to Frutillar yet?
No.
So if you go to Frutillar, it's Puerto Varas, then Yanquihue, which is the town you see down here. One town up north is Frutillar. Frutillar has a theater called the Teatro del Lago, like the lake theater, which sits on the lake. You need to go there. It's beautiful. Okay. This is a world-class theater. Like you go there, it's really world-class. The acoustics, they have people coming from the best orchestras and ballet and opera in the world. They're coming here. Why? Because somebody built the theater, right? It was philanthropy, but it happened, and it's happening, and it's become a hub for music. So yeah, it just depends on the will of somebody
to build the theater.
Exactly.
That's a really cool concept.
Yeah, and these guys with the Patagonia Biotech Hub, I think they're on to the same kind of stuff. We can build Biotech Hub here in Puerto Varas, regardless of whether our customer base is here or even like the talent pool is here, or we can bring people in.
It can be done.
It can be done, yeah.
I think this is probably a good time to wrap this up. Is there anything that you are particularly passionate about or interested in that you wanted to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet?
Regarding the oceans, I've become increasingly worried about the situation with the oceans and coming back on that sense of purpose. So about 2 years ago, I started reading about how these forever chemicals and microplastics and so on are basically killing life on the oceans. And that was even after I started working with the seabed remediation, which was for me like a very particular problem of one particular industry. Mm-hmm. When I started reading about this, I think I was depressed for like 2 or 3 months when I saw like the level of damage that we've done on the oceans and how gloomy the future seems to be on that sense. But yeah, going back on that purpose, eventually I realized, I'm not going to solve this single-handedly. So just make sure that I'm at least pointing in the right direction, right? So of course, if I can do more, I'll do it. But at least keeping the focus on the right direction of improving, and not just doing stuff because it could be a good business. It could be good money, maybe. But at this point, we cannot be indifferent and just do stuff because we like it or it could be profitable. Needless to say, if you are, rowing on the wrong direction and the stuff you're doing are hurting the planet more, yeah. But even like being indifferent and doing stuff that, that it's just for entertainment or whatever, we are beyond the point where we cannot stay indifferent. And it doesn't mean that you need to have that great idea that will save the world, but at least, go on the right direction. Yeah.
Is that almost like a code or a filter that you keep in the back of your mind in running your business, that it needs to align with those values and you need to push in the right direction?
Yeah. Alignment, alignment on the same exact direction, but just keep it on the right side of the aisle, right? Because of course everybody's worried about their individual problems and we all need to feed our families and so on. But yeah, just being completely indifferent or of course going on the wrong direction is just, we are beyond the point where we cannot do this anymore. Yeah.
Jose, that was a really cool conversation. Thanks so much for the time and hosting me here. This has been the best view I've ever had in an interview. This is gonna be hard to beat.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about the office, but yeah, it has a story.
If you want to tell it, I mean, I've got time.
Yeah, the office is. So last year we were on the peak of seabed remediation, or well, actually no, 2 years ago. Like I said, there was a regulatory change. Mm-hmm. At some point we were 65 people in the company, and working in this office we had 25, and right now we are 15 overall. So we externalized all the operational logistics of the seabed remediation and reduced the head, and that was super painful. Yeah, we didn't keep the subject of what were the challenging times. That was one of the challenging times. About a year ago, we had to make really tough decisions. And so, the office seems a little bit empty right now, but yeah, it's got this great view, and eventually as we go into other industries, I think we're gonna fill it up again. It's just this roller coaster of entrepreneurship. They teach you about the valley of death, the death valley of, yeah, but it's the same as like in real life when you're climbing a mountain that you think you've reached the summit and you're still climbing.
Yeah, so there's potentially more than one valley of death.
Yeah, it's not smooth.
It's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, thanks for that. Just to close it off, do you have any final message, call to action? Do you want to point people to any resource or website in particular?
Well, everybody's welcome to check out our website, ChucaoTech.com. But no, one of the things that I enjoy about what I'm doing right now is meeting new people. So I'm always open for a conversation. I don't use a lot of social media. I just have my LinkedIn. I'm not in Instagram or Facebook, but do find me in LinkedIn. And if you want to have a chat, I always think that my personal greatest resource is the network that I can build. I always think that if my company doesn't work out in the long run, at least I've got my network. So yeah,
that's
reach
a really
out.
good point.
I'm happy to chat in person or online. So
yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. It's got to be said that on LinkedIn you are Jose P.
I have no idea what my.
I know because I struggled to find you a couple of times.
All right.
You got to put the P in. So we'll put a link on the show notes. Thank you so much, Jose.
All right.